Hi BookTube, it's Amy. So as you can guess, I'm here to do this Knick-Knack BookTube tag that's been making the rounds. So Steve Donahue turned this idea into a tag earlier this week or last week, I forget which, but I do know the initial idea came from Steve Partridge, who I also occasionally watch. And so I'm just going to hop on board this trend here, join the crowd, join the party, and talk about what's on my bookshelves here, these knickknacks. So as you can see, a lot of my knickknacks are on a single empty shelf. And you're probably wondering why there is an empty shelf, since almost every other shelf in this apartment is packed with books. And this is because this is my new bookshelf that I purchased at the beginning of August. And so I'm still in the process of accumulating more books to fill the space. And so for now, I filled it with these knickknacks that are normally haphazardly spread throughout all the shelves and teetering precariously on the edge of shelves packed with books. So what do we got here? We got a couple of teacups. So this one on the end here is a Royal Albert teacup. There used to be a matching saucer, but about 2 months ago, I had it sitting on a bookshelf near the window, and somehow the saucer ended up shattering. It was in 3 pieces. And I went over and noticed that the saucer was just sitting shattered on the shelf. And so I was disappointed, but not too disappointed, because I had this orphan saucer lying around that Annesley, England, bone china. Doesn't exactly match, but it matches well enough. So I just substituted that. And that Royal Albert teacup is something that I actually thrifted when I was about 14 or 15. In Ontario high schools, you have to do 40 hours of community service in order to graduate. And so I did my community service early on, starting in grade 9, and I ended up doing volunteer work at a local charity shop. And I did, in fact, continue to volunteer there all throughout high school, even after I had my community service hours. But that often meant that I spent a lot of time just digging through donations and finding choice bits to purchase myself. And so I think the teacup with its original saucer I paid about $6 for, and there was actually a green teacup, also Royal Albert, that I paid another $6 for, that I have also since broken the saucer for, and I did eventually get rid of that one. But then over here we have another teacup, also thrifted. This one is a yellow floral pattern here. I don't actually recall where I picked this up, but I do believe it was at some point in my undergrad. So back when I was still living near Kitchener, Ontario, rather than Ottawa. I don't really go to thrift stores or charity shops here in Ottawa at all, just because they're so out of my way, and unless I'm looking for books, there's not really anything that I would be shopping for in those shops anymore. And then we have here, it's just a paper mandala here, colored. It's just sort of thrown here because I had my birthday cards from earlier this month on this shelf, and that is a nice little mandala that my sister colored and slipped into the birthday card that she sent me. Then up here in the front we have this tiny little tea set, which is actually made in Japan. I'm not entirely sure how old it is. It is something that my great-grandmother owned. I would assume she probably purchased it at some point, maybe in the 1980s or something, just judging on the patterns, but who knows, it could be older. I did, because of this little miniature tea set, go through a phase in middle school when I loved miniature tea sets. Now, this is something my mom had, and she passed it on to me when I was maybe about 8. That's a lot of trust, but thankfully the pieces are so tiny that when you accidentally drop them or knock them off a shelf, for the most part, they tend to bounce. The spout on the teapot is broken, and I believe there might have been a little lid for it at some point. But for the most part, it's in okay condition. They do get quite dusty inside, and they're hard to clean because I can't even fit the tip of my finger in that. But it's just a cute little nostalgic miniature teacup. Now you're probably wondering about this name block that inexplicably says Professor Amy on it. My name is Amy, but I'm certainly not a professor. And this is, was sort of a gag Christmas gift I got from a friend my first year here in Ottawa. He would sort of jokingly make fun of the fact that I was a teaching assistant and I would be going off to lead my tutorial sections, or I'd be grading papers, and he would say to me, "Oh, it's time for Professor Amy again." And when he gave it to me, his mother said, "Don't let a real professor catch you with that." Yeah, it's just sort of been hanging out on my bookshelves ever since. Little bit of nostalgia for my first year of my master's. And then over here, we have this little porcelain doll here. And I got her, let me just pull her out in front of the camera. This is Marie. I named her Marie. I got her for Christmas when I was 8 years old. She came in a little box, and I kept her in a box for quite a while. But I've held on to her because she reminds me of this lovely older woman at the Lutheran church I attended as a kid who actually gifted her to me. And I gave her the name Marie myself because I just wanted a pretentious name or something. I think I'd been rereading A Little Princess or something. And in A Little Princess, Sarah actually names all her dolls, and so I wanted to name my dolls something elegant too. But she was given to me by a woman by the name of Mrs. Petty, and I would often sit with her in church. She always sat in the very back pew, and there were all sorts of boxes under the pew with crayons and coloring books. There was a box of candy and jujubes. But the reason she sat back there is because she is the one who would record the service on a big old cassette deck that was propped up in the center of the pew. And she was very close with the pastor's family and his children. And I would end up sitting back there usually one Sunday a month, sometimes more if I could get in on my god sister's week and sit with her as well. But it was just such a much more fun church experience if you're, coloring a Disney princess notebook, doing a puzzle, and sneaking jujubes out of a box, rather than sitting second pew from the front with my parents. But yeah, that doll just reminds me of her and of that period of my childhood. And for a while, I actually collected porcelain dolls, and I had close to 30 of them, mostly ones that I had thrifted. And so whenever I would go with my parents to shop at the thrift store, when I was a kid, all my clothes came from thrift stores. The entire family's clothes came from thrift stores, so we went to thrift stores a lot. Whenever we went, I would immediately go to the Knack section and look for another doll to add to my collection. And eventually I got rid of all the other dolls, but I kept this one just because she was the first, and I still rather like the way she looks. I've always thought she has a bit of a resting bitch face, just like me, I guess. And then over here, I don't know if you've looked closely, but it's not what it appears. So this was a Christmas gift from a friend. There is our Lord and Savior, Jonathan Van Ness from Queer Eye. He is the hairstylist. And one of my friends, she really loves Queer Eye. We both love Queer Eye. And so she found this on Etsy or something and just had to buy it for me. He's got what looks like a comb in one hand and a hairdryer in the other. And yep. And of course, from a distance, it does rather look like a Catholic candle. I get a good laugh out of that. And so those are the main knickknacks, but let's shimmy ourselves over here. And I'm going to have to hold this tripod up because it's not tall enough. But we do have a few more things over here. So first of all, we have this hand fan. This is the fan that they gave out at last year's Ottawa Pride pageant. So there was a pageant with drag kings and drag queens as part of Ottawa's Pride Week. Pride Month, rather. We have a Pride Month, but most of the events happen in one of the last weeks of August. And actually, it's actually Pride Week right now, and normally there would be tons of events. There would be a parade, but everything is virtual this year, and most of the virtual stuff doesn't interest me too much. I think they are doing a virtual Pride pageant, but I think I may have actually missed it. So we'll see if I can still watch that. Then I have a quite rusty Postal Scale here, and this is something that I snatched from a garage sale my family was having. So a number of years ago, almost 10 years ago, probably about 10 years ago now, my family was doing a yard sale. We had invited several other family friends to come and do a yard sale in our yard too, just to make it bigger, have a bunch of people. And my dad was cleaning through some old items that belonged to my grandpa, because my grandpa had just gone into a nursing home. Both my grandparents had. And this is one of the random things that showed up in some of the junk that we were going to sell. And I sort of snagged it. I said, let's not sell that. I'd rather keep that. And it is quite rusty, but I mean, it's dusty too. But I've always thought it's rather cute and neat. And there's this nice pattern on the top. And then this here is a little silver cup. It says Charles on it. And it was my grandpa's on my other side of the family, his baby cup. At a certain point, he decided he didn't want it. And my family was down visiting. And somehow I ended up claiming it. We were helping them one summer clean out the attic. And I came back with a couple of little knickknacks that my grandparents really didn't care too much about anymore. Then I've got this little jar here. Not much going on in here. There is my poppy from last November and a thimble here. So this is my great grandmother's thimble, and it actually says, if you look closely, I don't know if it's going to show up. Probably not going to come into focus, but it does say Phyllis on it, which was her first name. And it's really, really sort of small for my, now that I've got it stuck on my finger, it's small for my finger. And I don't really sew, but just another knick-knack that ends up taking up residence on my bookshelves. And so that's really about it. I have some family photos in the other room and a cinnamon sugar shaker, but that really is about it for the knickknacks. I used to have a lot more. I had candelabras and all sorts of interesting things, but at a certain point I got rid of them just because I felt like the bookshelves were looking cluttered and the knickknacks were starting to block my view of the books. So that is what's happening with with the knickknacks on my bookshelves. And there's my record player down there.